think it's all right. William Jockusch, who is now live on this.
Okay.
They all start with an informal, like you don't know when Substack is going to start the call. So, um, anyway, it's nice to see you. How have you
Good to
been?
see you.
Yeah, William and I used to work together at Wizards of the Coast about 26 years ago. But when did you arrive at Wizards of the Coast?
1995.
Holy cow! Like I didn't even know that. How did this happen to you? How did you get to Wizards of the Coast?
So I had been a math professor, which was, when I was growing up, I thought I wanted to be a mathematician. I was pretty good at math, but being a professor just did not work out for me. And I got into magic and I thought, oh, that'd be cool to work for them. So I wrote them a letter. And then many months later, I heard back from them and we did an interview still later. And actually, I got this call saying, we're going to offer you a job. And then silence. I was starting to get kind of concerned. So this was maybe not the smartest thing, but I called them back and said, I'm calling to accept your job offer. And
Yeah, I was like,
they
oh, I thought it would be unwise because you would have all the leverage. You're like, excellent, but like you countered your own like
Yeah,
leverage
it
bullets.
was totally unwise, but I really needed a job at the time. And so anyway, I mean, normally that kind of reasoning just gets one nowhere, be it in jobs or dating or whatever. But in this case, they really meant it, apparently, because then I did get a job offer and I went out there and started.
Yeah, I don't know how it was for you, but you didn't go to Wizards for money, right? They didn't pay well early on. There was like a sea change in like the early 2000s where they were like, oh, people might steal these employees if we don't pay them
Oh, do
enough.
they
But
pay
like,
people well now?
oh, I doubt it. Some of them probably. Yeah, maybe they do. I don't know. That's a good question for someone newer. Yeah, they did not
Well,
pay us well then. Yeah,
my initial salary, I think, was 40K.
yeah,
Of course,
yeah.
this
That's
was
about what I got.
1992 money. It's a lot more than it is today, but even back then, it was not huge. And
So
it
you
did
did. Oh, yes.
improve over time, but it was never I was never wealthy from my salary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That I'm familiar with. Sorry to interrupt. I was just so you join Wizards, you do your interview, they say they'll offer you, you say you'll take it before they even basically offer it. What happens next?
Then it took I think the reason that that happened was they were in the process of moving. Just in retrospect, I'm guessing that's why it worked out, why it sort of took them that long. And so anyway, I started and they weren't entirely ready for me, which is understandable because I was the one who had kind of pushed it. And
Mhm.
they kind of delayed the start a little bit. But anyway, I got out there, um, and we were working on Mirage, I think. Uh
It's the right time period.
Was there anything between Ice Age and Mirage?
I mean, just, alliances, right?
Oh, yes, we were working on okay, yes, we were working on alliances, that's right. Uh, yes, we were working on alliances, and it was just very intense. Nobody had clearly defined roles of what they were supposed to do. So,
Who was
uh
there at that point? Who are you working with?
uh, Charlie Catino, Bill Rose, Joel Mick, Mark Rosewater showed up very shortly after I did.
Mhm.
Actually, Bill Rose might have been no, I think Bill Rose was before me, but
Mm.
both of those, Bill and Mark and I all started at around essentially the same time, although Bill, of course, had been part of the original group that did Magic, so he had started around that time, but he had been working on Magic for quite a while.
Yeah, no. Okay. So you work on alliances. That's a set I like a lot. I remember that very fondly. It's been Yeah, it's like I can barely remember what's in the set. So I'm like, are there any stories you remember from, like, making that set at the time?
So there's one story, well, I don't remember it, but I've heard it, and so it stands out to me. So I was focused, probably too focused on power level, and sort of keeping things from getting out of control. And so at one point, there was some meeting where, what as I heard it told afterwards, it was, "Don't tell William we're even here." And they made a bunch of
Yikes.
cards better. So, anyway, it worked out.
Yeah, that was a good set, and, for a while there, how did you guys figure out what roles to play, right? Like, you ended up being kind of the first game developer, right? But how did it shake out?
It was just what people did. I mean,
Mhm,
I got the cards, and so my, immediate reaction to it was, "Well, let's start building decks and play testing them."
mhm.
And so out of that, it naturally became that I was a developer.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So you start working on Mirage. I don't know much of the story of these sets making, so, like, anything you have, like I'm interested in 2 things, like, 1, like, how the Mirage block kind of, like, becomes what it is and, like, what your impact is on it, and then
Sorry,
secondarily, like
sorry,
no, no, it's
sorry,
alright, it's
phone call. Okay, I just killed it. I will actually take the phone out of this room.
we are live. We are live on Substack, and
Okay, phone is
we're
gone.
back, we're back.
Yeah, I'm back.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm interested in how Mirage comes together and what the zeitgeist is at the time and how it, um, becomes a very, like, memorable set. It's a great set to play with. It's really the first one that felt like, "Oh, the people who made this, like, want us to play with it instead of just, try to figure it out as a puzzle." And then secondarily, I have this like weird if you're a philosopher, so each of you is a different philosopher who has their own take on what magic should be. Like, which philosopher are you in like the mix? Right? Are you David Hume? Are you like Thomas Hobbes? Are you, is there like who represents William Jockusch? Or if you can't find someone who is William Jockusch in terms of your
Oh,
voice at that time?
I wanted it to be very balanced, very
Gary.
even keel type of thing, probably too much in
Hmm.
retrospect.
Hmm.
Uh, so, like, growing up, when I was a kid, there were pinball machines, and, when I was a kid, like, a high score on a pinball machine might be 10,000 points. If you got 10,000, you were really doing well,
Hmm.
and of course, now it's like in the billions, and by the time I got to Wizards, it was like in the millions, and I just thought this inflation was really stupid. I didn't like it. And so that translated into, I liked the idea of always doing new stuff in Magic, but I didn't like the idea of power inflation. Um, and in retrospect, I may have been wrong about that. But anyway, so I was trying to keep stuff balanced and yet interesting. I wanted there to be interesting things that were new and different.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. What do you remember about Mirage? Like, what's your impact on Mirage? Do you remember
Uh,
them?
so I remember designing guild mages.
Mhm.
This was probably,
Those are really cool. Yeah.
yeah, and the mechanic has stuck afterwards. It was like there were 5 gaps in the set, and we wanted to do it was a multicolor oriented set, and we needed 5, I think it was common cards that we needed. And the idea just sort of popped into my head. Well, then let's have these cards that are in one color, but they work with allied colors. And I'm sure I called them something else, but they got named the Guild Mages. And I think Wizards still does them. I mean, not
Yep.
those specific ones, but Guild Mages in general.
Mhm. Yeah, I would guess that's right. Someone
And
who is
then
newer can tell us.
another one, I'm not sure which set this was in, but another early card that uh, so I was always focused on power, but multi-lands, I thought they had made them way too horrible before I
Mhm,
got there. And I came up with the idea of lands that just come into play tapped, and after that, they're multi-lands.
mhm.
I'm not sure which set that was in. In retrospect, those, I mean, I was trying to push the power level higher there, but the ones I did were still too weak. I wish I had pushed it higher more.
Yeah, I think that's Invasion.
Okay.
Uh, those were good. I mean, those were good for the time. They were just like the, steps towards trying to make them, like, act good, like, for constructed and whatnot.
Well, but I mean, did anybody ever use them in constructed at all?
Been a while. I don't know. I think Invasion was a slower format in constructed. It's around Urza's block, which was very powerful but neutered by that point. And then after Invasion is Odyssey, which is pretty fast. So I would guess it was used in blue black, like the Psychotog deck. I don't remember that well though. I mean, we'll have to talk
Uh-huh.
to the tournament players from that time. We can ask.
And then we also made Painlands. I'm not sure if that was me or not. Those
Hmm.
were, I think, better, but still, they were a little bit clunky. Because I don't know, tracking a loss of one life
Yeah.
constantly is kind of annoying. It's like you want your effects to be bigger, but they were stronger than the comes into play tapped lands for sure. And I think it was on as a balanced choice, it was better.
How the process of making magic change over time? Do you remember anything about, um, I remember I get there when Randy's there and the processes evolve further, but were there like any sea changes in how you guys worked? In the, I say Mirage, Tempest, and Urza's block?
Well, after Urza's, there were. I
Yeah.
think during that time, no, there really were not.
Okay.
Then Urza's, the power, we
Did they
obviously
hide you in a
had
closet?
some
Did they hide you in
issues.
a
What?
like, where did they hide you? Because
So, well,
you're the balance
Urza's,
guy, yeah.
so see, this is where, so I think I was too much. It's a mistake in any situation to let people get too much into camps.
Mhm.
And this was kind of a personal relationships type of error that I think I did make. Was I was so in the camp of keeping everything under control and everybody else was in the other camp. And
Mhm.
when you have that, that's dysfunctional. And
It sounds familiar from a
that is what,
political perspective, but
yeah,
yeah.
it's political and it's dysfunctional. So I think that is a big part of how Urza's got to where it was. And then also in Urza's, so Time Spiral, the card, not the set, we
Mhm.
had a gap. That was my design, and it was completely broken, and I was the balance guy, and if nobody else was, I was like, "Well, I'll design this. I think the balance is okay." And nobody else was gonna, "Oh my god, we got William to agree something is is not excessively strong," and so nobody else was gonna push back against that, and then it was completely
It
broken.
it was basically like Coca-Cola when cocaine was in it, right? Like, as a player, I'm like, "Wow, I feel way more powerful and happy than I should." Um, and so, like, I remember it quite fondly, but, like, it was, like, imbalanced and, created different problems, but, I never drank Coca-Cola with cocaine in it, so I have no idea what that really feels. Yeah, no, it's predate this, but, I doubt that people disliked it, is my guess. Um Yeah, Urza Saga was a blast to play with. It was actually, like, from a player's perspective, like, a real joy aside from the, like, first turn kill dynamic that wasn't pervasive. It was just in that extended format, it went really fast. But if you were like, "Hey, what are" when I started this project, like, 4 months ago, I hadn't played Magic in a while, and I wasn't part of these Facebook groups, but writing about Magic on Substack changed all the algorithms for every other platform, and so now I see, like, all these different Magic collectors and, people who are playing the new sets. And whenever I see cards from Urzasago, like Cradle, Gaia's Cradle, or Tolarian Academy, it just makes me happy. So it for me, it's like I have a lot of fondness for that period. Um, to even though it didn't play out quite the way, I don't even know what that set would be like if it was remastered or revisited. Like the William Jockusch version of that set would be a pretty fascinating thing to see.
Well, I remember actually not really liking the untap mechanic. I thought
Oh
it
yeah,
had potential for being broken.
it
Um,
did.
and it was totally broken and yes.
Yeah, that mix of personalities matters a ton, right? All of you have really strong personalities. Like Rosewater, really strong personality. Elliot,
Yeah.
extremely strong personality. You have a strong personality. And it's something that's interesting, and I haven't talked to Bill yet about this, but he, for the early days, wanted to have more of a wolf pack that argued a lot. And as, the person who was kind of responsible for listening to everyone and corralling them into a direction for a while, like, it felt heavy, in terms of trying to make a game great. Like, you're intentionally not rowing all in the same direction, or you need to have, like, enough structure in place to make sure everyone knows what the target is. Um, like, do you like the wolf pack in retrospect, or, like, how would you change those political dynamics to make it, healthier and safer for the people making the game?
Uh, well, I think in retrospect, if I had pushed less on power levels, and there are areas where I certainly could have done that, then
Mhm.
other people might have pushed more to make sure that things and just don't get into this camp where you're always the person taking a certain side. If you find that there's an argument and you're always taking a certain side of it, you have to consider the possibility that maybe you're the problem, or
Yeah, you're not gonna
not the whole
win that
problem,
way.
but part of the problem anyway. Um, there are cases where you are actually correct, and you should. I mean, Winston Churchill before World War II or something was always taking a certain side of the argument, and he was just dead right. So that does happen, but you have to consider the possibility that you're wrong.
Mhm. Okay. So you work on Tempest and Ursus. It's kind of the same processes as usual. I think Henry Stern shows up at some point. In general, Magic to play is fun. It's growing. Um,
He and Mike Elliott both show up at about the same time.
mhm.
I don't remember exactly, but they were pretty close to each other.
Yeah, one thing that is not in my conscience. So in my time at Wizards, we had a lot of like new projects emerge. Were more of a business focus than maybe Peter and Vince had, from the sense of like, hey, what vertical are we going to try to win, or how are we going to think about our strategy moving forward? Like, what's the company thinking at that point, or is it all in on Magic early on? It like the
That was
acquisition of TSR shows up.
Pokemon.
Yeah. Hmm.
So they were making a lot of money on at one point, for a while, they were making more on Pokemon than they were on Magic, but I think they sort of recognized that their Pokemon revenues were not going to last.
Yeah, yeah,
And there was it was there was a tremendous amount of hiring for a while because Magic was doing so well. Um, Although now I think it's doing much better than it was at the time, but
it has continued to grow. Yeah.
relative to the time, it was doing quite well, and relative to the company. And so there was a lot of hiring and, uh, I don't know, I forgot it was just fun to work there.
Yeah, it felt very countercultural to me in like the '90s, and then Hasbro makes the acquisition, and then it becomes more cultural, in part from a desire to make it a more like tight operating business. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, well, Hasbro at first was kind of hands off,
Hmm.
uh, as far as Magic goes. They were not hands off about Pokemon, but they were about Magic. They didn't wanna kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. Later, I think they became more hands-on, but at first they were not.
Okay. Did you work on the Pokemon stuff? I don't know, like
No.
yeah, no. Okay. When did you start working on non-magic stuff?
While I was there from time to time, I worked on BattleTech,
Oh, cool.
which I think did moderately well. I worked on Netrunner, which sort of always seemed to do well enough to cause them to believe that it might actually become a success,
People love
but
that game.
it never, so people still play it, right?
Mhm.
It was, you can't call it, it wasn't like a 0. People still play it, but I don't think it was ever a significant moneymaker for the company.
I vaguely remember, like, I think it was Zvi Mauschwitz, I don't know for sure, and if I'm wrong, Zvi, I apologize, but he was like, "Can I acquire this? Can I just buy this IP? I love it." And so I thought it was, like, oddly beloved by, like, a set of people who really strongly loved it.
Uh-huh.
It's a cult classic. Yeah, I mean, it was weird. There was, like, a Xena game when I got there, I couldn't tell how, like this is something that, applies to my time as well. So there's, like, a Xena card game. There's all these weird things, and I get there, and you guys are working on sports games, and, Magic has, 5 people on it or something, 10 people on it, and, like, from a strategy perspective, they understand their business far better now than they did back then, but I wonder a little bit if, like, you have a sense of if you were the one figuring out how to make your bets and apply your team, if you take those resources, um, how would you think about making bets in retrospect, right? Instead of doing a ton of different things. Um, yeah, I'm curious about what your strategy would have been in 1999, right?
I have, oh, in retrospect?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, the big boat that Wizards did miss was doing a card game that is designed from the ground up for online,
Yeah, sure.
and that game is Hearthstone. Um,
hmm
I don't know which makes more money, Hearthstone or Magic,
Magic does, I think, for sure.
but they're both quite substantial, and
hmm
Wizards could have, and maybe still could, do a Hearthstone-like game. There are certain aspects of design, there are certain design issues that are just different for
hmm
online, and I don't think they ever really thought about that.
It is really weird that the company, like, they have a couple of Magic games online, but they never figured it out otherwise, right? Um, in a way, they focused and decided it wasn't their DNA. I know they're investing in it more now. It does seem like a bridge that could have been crossed if they understood how to make that investment well. I talked to Randy a bit the other day. They did some good things in that digital group after we had gone. But they never figured out how to build a coherent org that could grow together for the long term, and that compounding, like, growth in an organization ends up being, like, extremely valuable and making games like that and supporting them in perpetuity.
Well, the big thing in an online game is that you don't want the sort of back and forth that you have in Magic in terms of, "I'll play this spell, do you wanna counter it? I'll play this lightning bolt on your creature, do you have a giant growth to," because as soon as you have that kind of thing, then both people have to be glued to their computer the whole time. Actually, you can have that kind of thing in a real-time game, but not in a, it's a, Magic is, I think of it as essentially, well, I don't know if turn-based is the word, but Magic has a series of discrete actions that
Mhm,
one takes, and it's like, "Okay, your chance to do an action, my chance to do an action, regardless of whose turn it is." And those in Magic go back and forth, and that doesn't work really well online. There are 2 ways that you can do a game online that do work. There's the Hearthstone way where, like, I have 1 minute for my turn, and then you have 1 minute for your turn, and during your turn, I can get up and get a drink of T or whatever. And that works quite well. And then the other way for an online game that does work is the RTS, Warcraft, StarCraft, Dota type thing, where it's everybody's turn at all times and things are just happening.
That sounds really cool to me, like the notion of doing a ladder with a card game and figuring out how to make that work. It's
Doing
interesting,
what card game?
like an RTS style where there's like multiple people who aren't constrained by like action turn. It's
Oh my
weird.
goodness. Do
It's
a
more like
RTS that's like Star Well, you could actually.
yeah,
Uh,
I'm pretty sure you could.
so actually drone warfare might lend itself to that pretty well. So drones, wow. So drones, it's like if your actions are to put out this drone and that drone and the other drone, and then the drones by themselves without your intervention go fight each other, then you could have cards for the drones, and yeah, that might work.
That sounds pretty neat. It's have you I have not played Brian Tinsman's games, but the dynamics as it's been explained to me, like, make it sound like it's a card game where you have, like, a battlefield component, and the momentum is very different than, like, a Magic. It's, you can win a battle, but the war is not necessarily, like, uh, tied so deeply to it like it would be in a Magic.
What's this game called?
Wonders of the First, I'm talking to
Wonders of
Brian.
the First. Okay.
Yeah, I think, well, I'll talk to Brian a bit more after this call. I'll chat with him. Um, one thing one thing I remember about you, and there are a couple of ways this applies. One, you were actually a pain in the ass to play against in R&D. You were actually very good at Magic and quite knew how to play well. Like if you had been able to play on the Pro Tour, like you could have done it. Um, but two, you were actually really good at a lot of different video games. Even though like you're not a Twitch gamer, you were still good at StarCraft because you were so like able to think about it in a different way, and you were very good at Heroes of Might and Magic. I'm kind of curious what your best games are today, but I'm also like curious about like your approach to playing these games because I do think you were called out then as being like uniquely interesting and great as a gamer, right? As a gaming mind.
Oh, I was? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you were good at these games where like you would think, oh, maybe William would be at a disadvantage, and like you figured out ways to have an advantage, right?
So, like, I play a lot of Dota lately, and I am hopeless. Dota does have a lot of Twitch aspects. You
Hmm.
get into these team fights, and I am hopeless. I get into a team fight, and I cannot find my hero on the screen because there's just so much going on, and I'm like, "Where's my hero now?" And often I just can't figure it out. So, but yes, I understand pretty well mathematically, oh, if I have this and this item, then the math of it is going to work in my favor. And so it works out. The combination, there's an advantage and a disadvantage. The combination can work out reasonably well.
Hmm.
My
Okay.
best game nowadays, I think, is probably Axis and Allies, which is a turn-based take all the time you want in the world to think about it. So if there's strategy and there's not Twitch, then that's going to be
Have you joined
just,
Randy at these Randy and Nate Heist? They go to this board game, the World Board Game Championship. This seems like a Williams
I
special to
have
me.
not. It could be, but I just have so much at home.
Oh, sure. I'm like, oh, I've bet a little side pot on William in that. So I'm like, I'll plant the seed for when the time comes, and I'll set the lines appropriately. Randy's pretty good at this stuff too. Um, but I think you'd be all right. Yeah, I remember playing a lot of board games with you. That was definitely a part of the culture that hasn't come up on any call. But it wouldn't be crazy for us at like 6 o'clock to start playing Raw or any Reiner Knizia game or
Yeah, that's
anything
true.
really.
Yeah.
That was pretty special, I think. In my life, like, I don't seek that out very often because I'm a dad, same as you. I'm like, "Hey, I sure
How
have a
many
lot of
kids do
parenting to
you
do."
have?
I have 2. I have a 6 a 7 and a 10. Don't tell her that I
Uh-huh.
said 6. Yeah, it's I find it to be a lot of fun. It's the best. Um, and because of that, I haven't thought about playing games really in 10 years on my own, like, except for on a holiday or something. But I do miss that part of life, especially, like, up until 35, I'm, like, out there playing board games all the time. I'm like, "Yeah," board game hustler, and then it's cricket since then, tumbleweeds. But Wizards had a pretty great culture around that. Anyone could play at any time, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I show up, we start working on Odyssey. You're in the mix as one of the people who leads development. Harry Potter shows up. You start leading that for a while.
Yeah.
You saved my life, William Jockusch.
That
Uh,
earthquake, not really. I mean, had it gotten worse, so I've thought about that, right? So we were in developing Harry Potter, and there was all this shaking everywhere. I was listening to it and thinking, that has to be an earthquake because it was shaking. It wasn't shaking in one place, it was everywhere, and it was sustained, and what else could possibly cause that? And I knew that in an earthquake, the official advice is to stay under like a frame or an object of furniture. So I told people to do that. Although in retrospect, the way that earthquake actually was, we could have just run out of the building. But of course, you don't know that at the time. You don't know, is it going to stay at this kind of medium-sized earthquake level, or is it going to turn into something where it's shaking really hard and the building falls on you as you're running out of it and you're dead? So it was sort of the thing that came to me at the time was the advice that I had read. But in retrospect, we actually could have run out. So I don't know.
yeah, I mean,
Anyway,
you were the team
nobody got
leader. We
killed.
fol we followed your lead. It was a very serious earthquake. It was the first serious earthquake and probably still the most serious earthquake. I've lived in the Bay Area for 16 years and knock on whatever,
Uh-huh.
I will call it wood.
I mean, it
Like,
was like a magnitude 5 or something, wasn't it?
yeah, I mean, the bridges, like, were the viaduct had to be replaced or safeguarded and couldn't be no one drove on it for, I think, a year or 2. So it was, like, substantial for that area because they weren't so accustomed to having earthquakes of that magnitude. They hadn't built to prepare for it. So, like, the damage was more severe than it would be in other places.
Uh-huh. Okay, I'm just looking at it now on Wikipedia that they call it the 2001 Nisqually earthquake, damage $1 to $4 billion. Oh, it was 6.8
Oh, really? Yeah,
magnitude.
that's a big one.
Wow. Okay, I thought it was a lot smaller than that.
Yeah, I thought you were really good in a crisis.
Okay,
That was a good sign that you were the right leader for that Harry Potter trading card game team, and
okay.
we should follow you. I thought, uh, I admire I can still, like it's a moment that is burned into my brain when I'm 80 and lying down in some sort of, uh, facility. I'll be like, "Ah, yes, that memory is a good one. I was safe that day." Um yeah, the Harry Potter game was kind of an interesting one. You were one of the leaders on it. I know Elaine took over and Robert was also tied to it. It's interesting to me that it did decently, right? It did decently well. It was in Barnes& and Noble. Like, that's an interesting one where if you're like, "Hey, if you go back in time, is there anything you would do differently to make that a success?" Because from an IP perspective, that thing has stayed
Well,
incredibly
the
strong. But I thought that team did a pretty good job on that. That's one of those games that's kind of lost to history, but I thought it felt pretty flavorful full, and, it was cool. Um, yeah. I'm curious what else I'm trying to remember. I remember you. I remember you lost, like, 50 pounds, like, just by tracking calories at a time. I think, that was pretty impressive to me. Like, it was interesting. I followed your example at some point. I was
okay.
like I
Well,
was like, "Alright."
it was, but it later came back.
Mhm.
So my takeaway there is if you really want to lose weight, what you have to do is restrict what you eat. Not how much, but what. So actually there was a period of time after Wizards of the Coast when I was really trying to live extremely frugally. I had just split up with my first wife. She had two young children, and I was trying to support them. And that just meant I really had to not spend much money.
Mhm.
And so my budget for food was like $20, $30 a week or something. And I would buy all of these beans. And I didn't have a car. I would walk everywhere. And I would make all these bean dishes, and that that was very effective for losing weight, and had I continued to be that impoverished, I probably would have stayed off.
Well, I'm less excited about this story in retrospect.
Well, no, I
But,
remember it actually as a very enjoyable
yeah,
this time
you
of
were happy.
being in it was a totally different way of thinking. I liked it almost. It was just a totally different way of thinking about the world that, okay, I have to be really careful with my money, but now what can I do? And yes, I could live. I just had to eat differently. But even that wasn't bad because it got me to losing weight. So I thought it was I thought that period, this was after Wizards, was really quite good in a way.
Mhm. Yeah, it feels good to, give your body what it needs.
Well, and to
Yeah.
do the most I could with very few resources
Mhm.
felt good.
How did we miss Psychotog? You actually played Psychotog before it went out,
I
and
don't even remember that. Well,
oh, I do.
it's gotta be a very combo-oriented thing.
Mhm.
Um, and in playtesting, you are not going to get to the optimal decks in playtesting
Yeah.
because you just aren't gonna find all the combos and stuff. So a card like that, it's gonna be in playtesting, it's gonna be hard to know how good it is or isn't, because if you change, like, 3 cards in this deck, then probably it goes from being broken to not very good, and in playtesting, you just don't have enough time or enough people, to find that sort of thing, so there's always gonna be a guesswork element to what you put
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, I think that's right. It is a weird dynamic of, like, um it's a little bit like, I see it as Harry Potter world where, like, the steps moved from one door to another, and you're like, the whole universe is changing, every week. I don't know, like, how you kept on top of everything. Did you keep it all in your head? Did you just have, like, you know it's interesting. What was your approach to making sure the set stayed, like, within the bounds of what you wanted, given how much change there was and how
Well,
kind of
first of all,
cognitively
we
expensive it is?
didn't always succeed in that, and that was Urza's
Yeah.
Saga.
Yeah, no, for
Um,
sure.
but my approach was just to keep building decks and playing them and see what I could discover, and I did discover a lot,
Mhm.
but did not discover everything, and it probably wasn't humanly possible to discover everything.
Yeah. I that is, yeah, we had some, foibles in our time too that, uh, memorable, but, not there's no, like, lasting I don't I'm not angry at you, Skull Clamp. I
You're not angry at what?
Skull Clamp. Do you remember Skull Clamp? It was a
No.
card that you could give a creature, I think, +1, -1 or something like that, or +2, -2, and then you drew 2 cards when it died. And so, it changed at the last second, in the editor lead developer loop, and, it made it so that you could essentially kill a whole bunch of, like, elves and draw infinite card or, like, so many cards that you could blow
Yeah.
through
And then what
anyone.
happened? Did they ban it?
Yeah, they had to ban it. That was probably the worst miss in my time. In fact, it's, like, clearly the worst miss in my time. It's the card I would go back and change. Is there a card you would go back and change after all this time?
Time Spiral.
Yeah, Time Spiral. Would you make it infinite mana so no one could ever cast it?
Right. And, well, Force of Will, although that one I had right, and that one I think this is where I was talking about this dynamic where you're always the person who's pushing on a certain thing, then it gets unhealthy. And if I had been pushing on power less in other area
Yeah.
cards, then I might have been heard better on Force of Will. And I did get it nerfed before release. It had been 2 UU rather than 3 UU, and there was no 1 life cost. But I sort of knew at the time it needed to be nerfed more, which did not happen.
I'm kind of curious who pushed for it to be good, but
I think everybody,
yeah.
and and I actually blame myself for not understanding the social dynamic and how to manage that.
Yeah, I think the social dynamic is really key. It's been interesting talking to so many different personalities, and like some of them are really strong. Every different person has their own take on what they want reality to be or what they think reality is. And you have to figure out a way to like make it all balance. And everyone's really smart and powerful. It's a little bit like being at Hogwarts and you're in a room with a bunch of professors that have different skills and
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to corral them all. The human element seems like uh, you need the right personality mix to drive things forward that can listen well but not take feel at things too much, not be too empathic that it hurts the person who's in the middle.
And don't think, I guess, realize that there's one aspect that you're going to understand other better than other people, but there are other aspects that they're going to understand better than you are.
Hmm.
And also realize that in this type of thing that you have to know when to give way. That maybe that's a key skill in this, because yes, you have to argue for your point of view, but you also have to know when to give way and say, okay, this one is maybe you guys are right and I'm
Yeah,
wrong. Maybe let's do it your way and move on.
yeah. Well, what have you been up to since? What have you been doing with yourself?
So many different things. So uh uh, immediately after Wizards was my first trips actually, my first trip to Ukraine was shortly before I left Wizards, but then afterwards, I went on a lot of those trips and some to
Hmm.
Russia, and I got into poker for a while. Then later, I got into software development.
Hmm.
So my life sort of goes through phases. Like there was the math phase and the magic phase and the poker phase and then the software development phase.
Okay. Are you still software developing? Like, it's a pretty interesting time to be doing that.
So I still am employed as a software developer. Right now, the company, it's a consulting company that sort of depends on getting outside business. And right now it doesn't have it
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
have clients. So they're paying me a minimal amount of money to not work. And I'm hoping that they will again have work, but I don't know. Maybe they won't. And then I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. I've yeah, it's an interesting time. I've been playing around with Claude and Claude Code and Anti-Gravity, and I'm starting to figure out how to like build different tools that I need um, that are safeguarded enough to like be trustworthy.
So do
To
you
try to,
write
yeah,
code?
I don't write code, but I did go to technical grad school after Wizards, and so if I need to, I can. I have written things that work. I've mostly been on the data science side. And so I'm more comfortable with back end than front end, but front end's pretty easy. So it's not, If you were like build everything from scratch, I wouldn't enjoy it, but I could probably do it very slowly. And
Uh-huh.
if you're vibe coding definitely makes it so that like um I can build the tool set that I need over time. I'm mostly interested in building efficiencies for myself at this point versus like software that other people use. But for that purpose, it's awesome. It's really fun to be able to automate certain aspects of my business that would take a lot of time. Um,
So, you're in business for yourself?
I'm taking time off. So I worked at a generative AI startup last. We Andreessen Horowitz and Netflix are our two lead investors, and we made a bunch of games for Netflix. And I was there for 2.5 years, and then in January last year, I ended up in the hospital. I got rushed to the ER. This is like the fourth time that's happened in the last 15 years,
Right.
and so I was like, I should probably stop doing these crazy startups. And so I continue to try to work through it and get healthier over the course of the year. But the doctors kept telling me I wasn't succeeding. So I'm right now like just kind of I go for a lot more walks. I go to the gym and I'm having fun with this project. And I am healthy enough to do like I love working, but I can't continue to like try to shoot the moon and like sacrifice my future life for
Yeah,
sport.
I'm
You know, I'm
totally with you there.
yeah, like it's fun, man. Work is so fun. Working on Magic was so fun. Working on all these different startups over the last 15 years was really fun. But it's also really nice to reconnect with everyone after this time because I do think Magic had pulled a lot of really great people and minds together. It gave people an opportunity to connect in a way that allowed people to grow when they may not have had that opportunity elsewhere, right? I think Magic is very special in that regard, where it's kind of a lightning rod for many of us to get together and like um, the cohort of people that were around Magic in that first 5-10 years have gone on to be pretty tremendous out there, right? By and large, so it's been fun to do. I yeah, I'm not unhappy about it. That's for sure. It's nice to see everyone.
Mhm.
But yeah, I would say I'd say it's a hobby and kind of like pay it forward kind of project. It's more meant out of gratitude than anything. But I am trying to automate more of it so that I can spend my energy on other things. And so um just the
Automate what you're
scheduling.
doing right now, you mean?
No, no, like what I'm doing right now for the sake of like scheduling. So there's so many different social networking platforms or social media platforms.
Oh,
And wherever people are, you don't want to try to pull them to where you want them to be. You want them to be where they are and engage with the content the way that you want them to. And so Substack is really cool. It's like after this, you'll get a bunch of clips and a video, and then you can distribute those clips however you want across a bunch of different platforms and try to grow your awareness. And that's really cool. The thing is, you don't want to manually like schedule and like you don't want to manually like upload to each platform and like enter metadata for all these different
right.
things. You
Yeah,
you want to be able to
take forever.
right. So you want to like improve, make your life as much about signal as possible and eliminate the noise. And I think vibe coding has been really awesome for that. Does it? I want to spend my time making signal, not noise. Right. That's what I
Uh-huh.
want to do. And so that's what the current like tool set seems to allow you to do. And it's been a real joy. I'm very interested to see what the future of these social platforms is. If there's a subset of people that can like vibe code things well fast, like what does that turn into? Is it? It's not like TikTok, it's a different thing. It's not Roblox because that's predatory free to play gaming. Like, what are the different shapes of like how people are going to work together in the future? That interests me too, and that's a side benefit of doing what I'm doing for sure.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's interesting at all, but it's
Well, I've been interested in actually a different aspect of social platforms, which is how do you prevent hostile powers from abusing them?
go on. Yeah, I'm happy to shift to more serious topics. Yeah, I do think it's a good question. There's a question in my mind of like, what's the wins above replacement for the current leaders of these social platforms? Are they like above average at like running these things in a way that like leads to the right outcomes, or are they like below average? I'm kind of curious on your read on that, and that gives you a framing of like speaking to like the changes that you'd like to see or how you'd like to see things be
I
designed
don't
to
think we
help.
can blame them. I
Right.
don't think we blame the leaders. I think we have to blame ourselves.
Sure.
So here's a story.
Hmm.
Uh, Facebook is built to bring people together, but in 2016, on Facebook, there appeared these two groups, one called Heart of Texas, uh, aimed, uh, promoted Texas secession somewhat, uh, guns, barbecue, so sort of a very Republican-oriented group. And
Hmm.
then there was another one, I believe, called Save Islamic Knowledge. That might have been the name of the rally, but anyway, there was an Islam-focused group trying to bring Muslims together in America, and both of them planned demonstrations for the same time at the same place with opposing purposes. So one them, I think they was their demonstration that was called Save Islamic Knowledge, and then the other one was called Stop Islamification of Texas.
Oh my God.
So, which of these do you want to support? Well, my answer is neither,
Hmm.
because these groups were actually both Russian groups. They were both set up by Russia. And so they were trying to have these two opposing demonstrations at the same place at the same time. And it was it was clearly they were just playing around with starting conflict.
Hmm.
And so I imagine, although I don't know, I've never investigated what the two groups actually posted, that they both sort of posted. The Heart of Texas one posted bad things about Islam, and the Pretending to be Muslim one posted bad things about Republicans. And so now you have these two groups of people who may at times have some tendency to have conflict, but now you've got somebody that they trust. Because if you're in a Facebook group, it's like you look up to the group, you like its purposes.
Hmm.
And so they're both looking up to the leaders of the Facebook group who were posting nasty things about the other group. So you have these two demonstrations, and the people at the demonstrations got to yelling at each other and saying nasty things, not to actually physically fighting. And then after that, I don't know how, but somebody figured out that I I I can imagine how it's sort of an obviously suspicious thing. These two opposing demonstrations, just both organized by Facebook and just happened to be at the same place and time. You have
Hmm.
to wonder, okay, was there a common design here? And so anyway, this was investigated, and actually then at that point became a pretty good example of bipartisan uh cooperation. That like, I read an article about it in the Texas Tribune, and they quoted both Democrats and Republicans in Congress saying, "Well, look, this was this Russian operation. It was tremendously cynical. They're just trying to get people to fight each other."
Hmm.
So, people, some, at least a fair number of people, had figured out and publicized what was going on, and then it seems like we all completely forgot about it.
Hmm.
Um, so at the time of the Minneapolis riots, so you'll have some people blaming police for killing George Floyd. I'm not certainly not suggesting that that's a obviously I wish they hadn't killed him, but then you'll have other people blaming demonstrators for rioting. And but again, Russians were setting up Facebook groups, some of them pretending to be pro-police groups, and other ones pretending to be pro-black activist groups.
Mhm.
And the pro-police ones would then start inventing nasty things about black activists and posting them, and probably were believed by some pro-police people. And the ones that were pretending to be black activists would post nasty stuff about the police. And
Mhm.
plenty of African Americans have problems with the police already, and so they're probably sort of primed to believe if they see this person pretending to be a black activist and posting nasty stuff about the police, they're going to be primed to believe it. And then later you had riots in Minneapolis, and people were killed
Mhm.
in those riots. And so the Russians are really taking advantage of our open system in a way that we still haven't come to grips with. And I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
see it all the time, and it just drives me crazy. Like on Facebook, I am constantly, because I follow political contact topics, their algorithm is constantly promoting to me or posting. I don't know what the word is. But it's showing me, I guess that's the best word, activists from one party or the other. And I
Mhm.
frequently just block them from my feed, but it just keeps on feeding them to me anyway. And as a society, we really need to come to grips with this, because there are so many people who are in one camp or the other, and they post nasty stuff about the other camp, and they don't think, oh, wait, maybe my camp is partly at fault here.
Mhm.
Maybe we should slow down and check our sources, and probably some of our sources are the Russians lying to us, and some of them are true, but even then, let's consider that my camp might also be at fault here, and they don't, and it's a real problem.
Mhm. So you ended up moving to Ukraine,
For a
right?
while,
Mhm.
yes, for about, well, I mean, I don't know, define moving. So when I was doing my first set of trips to Ukraine, I would typically stay for a few months at a time, maybe 2, 3 months max, and I would just get tired. I would be like, okay, I want to go back to where people speak English. And I would go back to the US for a while. At the time, I was playing poker to make money, so I would do that, get up enough money and no longer be tired, and I would go back. But then later, yes, I lived in Ukraine 20, I think all of 2015 and no, not quite all, that's right. I showed up in, like, January or February of 2015, and I stayed until March of 2017 with a brief interlude where I was in Poland.
Mhm. Yeah, I see you as one of the most active, like, Ukraine supporters, and so I'm curious, you kind of mentioned Russia earlier, like, as someone who is an astute gamesman and a study of politics, like, how do you see the current climate? Um
Well, the first thing is you have to understand the game that everybody is playing. I mean, so these are a lot of these are people are deadly serious, but it's still, you suggested let's think about it as a game, and I think it's helpful as a way to think about it. Just sort of helps you to think it through what's going on here. So
Mhm.
the game, and we'll start with three groups, but there are more than that. But let's just start with three. Um, so the game the Russians are playing is, or Putin especially, is he wants the Soviet Union back. And the rules for Putin are, there are no rules. Do
Mhm.
whatever it will work to get the Soviet Union back. And if people get killed, so what? That's his game. Then for Ukraine, the game is, we want our country back, and we do not want to be ruled by Russia
Mhm.
whatsoever. So they actually before the full-scale invasion, I think there were some Ukrainians who would have been happy to reunite with Russia, and there are very few of those at this point
Mhm.
because of the war. But so for them, it's just like, no, we are not going to accept being conquered by Russia. And furthermore, we're not going to accept anything that might put us in a weaker position vis-a-vis Russia to be conquered later.
Mhm.
And then there's the US, which is currently just playing the game of we want there to be peace. So, and we're willing to give up some stuff to the Russians so that there will be peace. And there's a complete lack of well, not a complete lack, but there is insufficient understanding on the US side that given the game Putin is playing, that just won't work.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you do?
Well, the first thing is you have to understand the game that Putin is playing. Um, I think that's insufficiently understood, especially on the Republican side right now. And by the way, I want to be upfront about this. I am a Reagan Republican. I wasn't at Wizards. I was a Democrat at the time, but that changed afterwards, and but I'm not a MAGA person at all, or MAGA, or however you wanna pronounce it. It sort of
Mhm.
mystifies me. So I feel and this may help me in terms of developing my understanding of the situation, that I feel somewhat detached from both camps of the
Mhm.
current battles. Um, so what should the US do? Uh It should simply support Ukraine until Russia is sufficiently defeated and discouraged that they don't want to try it again.
Mhm.
That's what happened in World War II, right? I mean, like right now, today, in Germany or Japan, if somebody suggested, oh, let's go on this war of conquest, people would just be horrified. They wouldn't even think about it. Why? Because World War II was such a disaster for both of those countries that it, people just think it would be crazy.
Mhm.
Um, and Russia needs to have a sufficiently big disaster that they give up on this whole idea of conquest and even settling suppose were to settle the Ukraine war with Russia, and suppose not that they won't agree to this, but suppose that Russia agreed to freeze that war in place. Well, that would help Ukraine, but it actually wouldn't solve the problem, because then Putin would be free to go after the Baltics or Kazakhstan or um, the Caucasus. Like he's still, I mean, people know about Ukraine, people know less about Georgia. They have a government right now that's friendly to Russia that was quote unquote elected in a
Yeah.
rigged election where the Russians were doing everything possible, including beating people up, to make sure this one party quote unquote won their election.
Mm.
So you have to, Putin really has to be defeated, not just stopped, but defeated in a sufficiently big disaster that the Russians become uninterested in trying this again.
Why isn't there more resistance? Like, he's been kind of a bad actor for a long time. Like, on the global stage, why hasn't it held?
Well, people just have been inconsistent. And
Mhm.
a big part of it, I think, too, in the US is that the two political parties cannot learn from each other's blunders.
Mhm.
And that, I think, is a part of why. So Trump is keeps on trying to end the war by being generous with the Russians.
Mhm.
And it's a horrible thing because it encourages Putin to keep trying. If he were to be tougher on them, Putin would not keep trying. If he were to uh, give Ukraine more weapons and cut off Russian oil even more than he does, and so on, they would not keep trying
Mhm.
and they would give it up. But so the thing about that that's really remarkable is that prior to Trump making this class of blunder, the Democrats were in charge and they actually made exactly the same blunders.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I don't know if you remember the Russian reset.
Yeah,
This
go
was
ahead.
okay. So Russia invaded Georgia in 2008,
Mhm,
and Bush put in some pretty significant sanctions against Russia after that. Bush had been pretty friendly with the Russians prior to that invasion, and well, he was wrong in retrospect, but I'm not going to say that he was wrong at the time. He could not have known, or maybe he could have known, but he did not have the example anyway of Russia invading foreign countries uh, prior to that. Russia had wars in Chechnya, but that was could reasonably consider that to be internal to Russia. The Chechens didn't think it was, but it was within their international boundaries. They invaded Georgia in 2008. Bush
mhm.
put in some pretty serious sanctions on them after that. And then Obama came in and he was like, oh, well, we should get along with the Russians. Let's just be generous to them.
Mhm.
So he had this thing called the Russian reset, where he got Hillary Clinton to go over to Russia with this reset button. And they told the Russians, push the reset button and we'll just reset our relations and we'll take off all these sanctions on you. And they thought everything would be great.
I see.
So they did that. And the problem with this is that now Putin effectively has not been punished for invading Georgia. I mean, he was briefly by Bush, but the sanctions just didn't last long, and it was
Mhm,
only sanctions anyway. Um, and so based on that experience, he believed that he could get away with invading Ukraine. And so he did that for the first time in 2014. That's when he invaded Crimea and also started this ostensible rebels, but it was really thinly disguised Russians in Donbass.
mhm.
And so then Obama thought, okay, the Russians have a stronger interest in this part of the world than we do. We'll just be generous with them. And so he pushed the Ukrainians into agreeing to Minsk 1, which was like freeze this Donbass conflict where it is. And so then the quote unquote rebels, who were really Russians, broke that and took a little more ground. And so then Obama pushed Ukraine into agreeing to Minsk 2, which then the rebels also predictably broke. So Obama had made this mistake of being generous with the Russians. But on the US side, if Obama gets something wrong, the Republicans don't think, oh, we made this mistake of being generous with the Russians. We're not going to do that again. They
Mhm.
think, oh, those stupid Democrats did this, but we know better, which is just, it's bad thinking. It's dangerous thinking. And so then you have Trump get in for the first time, and his policy towards Ukraine at that point was kind of scattered. So he did do some things right. He started military aid to Ukraine during his first
Yeah,
term,
right.
but then he also withheld some of it because he was mad at the Democrats, well, at Ukraine for not investigating Hunter Biden, blah, 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 which, and the Ukrainians hadn't, because didn't want to get involved in U.S. partisan politics. But the big mistake on the U.S. side is both Republicans and Democrats see the conflict with each other as more important than stopping the Russians.
Mhm.
And that, I think, is the biggest error, and that has continued right up to today. So then fast forward to 2022, the US knew that Putin was going to invade. They were warning the Ukrainians. They had a press conference the day before the invasion saying the Russians are ready to invade. And somebody asked them a question: can you promise it won't happen tomorrow? And the answer was no. And then it did happen the next day. So they had this press conference on February 21st. It happened on 2020 on the 22nd. And here Biden had just taken a really weak line. Like, he had announced, oh, we're not going to send US troops.
Mhm.
Well, not sending US troops might be reasonable, but you shouldn't announce it. You should say, "Well, I'm not going to answer a hypothetical question." Don't tell Putin that you're not going to participate. Just instead say things that scare Putin. Uh,
Mhm.
Move some divisions to Poland or Romania or something. If you're asked why they're there, well, we just think it's, or even if the Russians are going on exercises in Belarus, if you're really bold, I'm not going to say that he should have been this bold, but it would have been reasonable for the US to do exercises in Ukraine. Why not? The Russians say we're just on exercises. Okay. Americans are just on exercises too. But
Mhm.
anyway, and then after the invasion, now it was Biden in charge, and he was still too weak. He did send military aid, but there were all these deals about, do we want to send this weapon system or that one? Oh, it would be escalatory. Let's don't. And over time, some of those weapon systems were sent, like
Mhm.
HIMARS were sent in, I think, the summer of 2022. So about 4 months after the invasion, roughly, were the first ones.
Mhm.
And cluster munitions were sent sometime after that. Fighter jets were never sent. So eh, I felt Biden was still being too weak. Also, Biden did not allow strikes by Ukraine in Russia for the most part. He did some,
Mhm.
but the Ukrainians got this idea in about 24 of blowing up Russian oil. And Biden was mad at them at first. No, we don't
Mhm.
want to destroy Russian oil. That would damage the economy, raise the price of oil, and hurt my chances of getting reelected.
Mhm.
Um, he changed that after the election, after he had lost. He changed that. So the
What would
U.S. has been consistently too weak.
Yeah, I guess the move is, like, you're playing Axis and allies now. You're in Trump's seat. Like, what do you do?
What do I do? I
Not as
am
William Jockusch. Donald
brutally
Trump.
uh make everything possible that the Russians don't want. Um, I send weapons to Ukraine. I support their drone industry. So the Ukrainians by now are building about half of their own weapons, actually, and most of their own drones. And the biggest constraint on drone building is money. So help them there.
Mhm.
Um, I think actually Trump is doing quite some things right. He is not opposed to Ukraine blowing up Russian oil. And that's happening, and Russia's oil revenues are declining over the past year. So a year ago, they were running close to 600 million euros a day. There's a website I follow that tracks it. And
Mhm.
now it's maybe 450.
Mhm.
And part of that is the decline in prices. Oh, that's all hydrocarbons, not just oil. So oil, gas, coal.
Okay.
Part of that is decline in prices, but part of it is a decline in their quantity that they can export because of Ukrainian attacks. I then The Russian shadow fleet So the U.S. is seizing some Shadow Fleet tankers. This is how they get their oil out um, of Russia to export, mostly is through tankers through either the Black Sea or the Baltic Sea.
Mhm.
And the ones in the Black Sea, Ukraine sometimes attacks them and they attack them when they're going back. So when they're not loaded with oil.
Mhm.
And Ukraine sometimes damages those ones. But then through the Baltics, the US has been seizing some of those. So that is good. Uh, and the Venezuela situation, I'm not going to say that Trump was or was not right on what he did with Venezuela, but what I will say is it hurts the Russians because they depended on Venezuela to some extent for it turns out you have to Venezuelan oil is very heavy. It has a lot of sulfur in it, and it works a lot better when it gets mixed with Russian oil, which has much less sulfur. And the change in government in Venezuela, well, the it's it's going to hurt the Russians. It's a
Yeah.
complicated. It's more complicated than just having a new government there, but what has happened there is hurting the Russians.
Yeah, I guess if you were building a model of how much do you need to hurt Russia for them to basically pull out of Ukraine, how well functioning are they today, and how much more damage would you need to do to their economy to get them to stop?
You don't know. We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my answer is just do the maximum damage to their economy until they stop.
Mhm.
And by the way, the US has, even ignoring Ukraine, the US has every justification to do that because have you heard of the Havana syndrome?
No, what's this?
This was so a lot of American people have started reporting these symptoms like uh, their head hurts and they have psychological problems coming on. And these were people who had been working, a lot of them were people who had been working against Russia, had won awards in some cases for opposing Russia.
Mhm.
And then they started having these symptoms, and pretty much figured out that it was the Russians physically attacking these Americans with weapons that didn't kill you, but hurt your brain. And some of them reported like hearing buzzing sounds and they didn't know like what it was. And the first ones that people noticed were in Havana, which is why it got called the Havana system syndrome. And CBS eventually linked up the timings of those attacks with the locations of certain Russian agents at certain
Mm.
times. And there was enough correspondence that I found it utterly convincing that, yes, it was the Russians who did this. And the US sort of like reacted like, well, we don't want a war with them. This doesn't compute. What do we do? Well, apparently nothing, because we don't want to have a war with them. And that's part of how we got into this war mess now. And it gives the US, this is what the Russians did was an act of war, really, actually attacking people.
Mhm.
So the US would have every justification to retaliate with things which are arguably acts of war, such as seizing Shadow Fleet tankers.
Okay. Yeah, I think I wanna change gears a little bit, although I've enjoyed all of this. Is there anything else on your mind you wanna talk to related to Russia and Ukraine, before we would move to the next thing?
Um, I guess yes. So the other thing that people don't understand is that with the trajectory the war is going on, it is perfectly reasonable to think that Ukraine will simply win because Russia is vulnerable in the pocketbook. They're they've sold over half of their gold reserves. I read one article claiming it was 70% just the other
Mhm.
day. This was in Ukrainian media, so even if you really support somebody, you should still recognize where their media might be exaggerating something that you want to be
Yeah,
true.
you have so much unknown information here, right?
That's right. So,
Yeah, so
but
it's hard to
anyway,
know anything.
they
Yeah.
definitely sold a large part of their gold reserves, so they are hurting for money, and also people in Russia are having problems, like, Putin blocked a bunch of people's bank accounts, I think just because he didn't want them taking their money out. So,
Ouch.
that's obviously a big ouch, and Russian air traffic is tremendously disrupted because Ukrainian drones keep flying over, and they are like, "Okay, we have to close all these Moscow area airports." And people can't drive often because they don't have gas. It's either too expensive or it's not there at all. So, it's realistic to think that Ukraine can win this by causing a Russian collapse. And it
Mhm.
really annoys me when, like, Rubio or somebody says, "Oh, the Ukrainians can't take it back, and that's just the truth." No, it's not the truth. We don't know that. We've never really given them our full support.
Okay.
So, yeah, let's shift gears. That whole
No, I mean, all that's good for me. Like, I'm like, "Alright, this is good food for my brain." Um, I liked all of it, from the learning perspective. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. Yeah, I wanted to talk about dad life, like how you handle technology and how you think about, growing the brains through gaming. Like, how does your background impact, uh, how you kind of interact with your kids?
Well, Elijah, I try to take a pretty light touch with him. If I see him getting into something that I don't think is healthy, I
Mhm.
actually don't. Well, if it's really dangerous, I will stop him, but if it's something like gaming a lot, it's like I would first of all, I would be a total hypocrite if I told
Oh,
him
yeah.
not to, and I also just see that it's not really effective to tell him what to do or not to do. So instead, I will try to make him aware of the ways that it could hurt him, but then I'll just say, "Look, it's your life, do what you want."
Mhm. You guys play games together at all?
Yeah, he tries to get me to play StarCraft with him, and sometimes
Oh.
I do.
Do you enjoy StarCraft at this point?
Yes, although, uh, there are some issues. The D key on my computer is actually completely broken, and that's what you use to build drones. So I have
Mhm.
caps lock mapped to D, which is good because I hate the existence of caps lock. So there's some challenges there, but yeah, I like it. I time limit it when I'm doing it with him.
Yeah.
Stupid phone. Close the door here.
Yeah, sure. No worries, no worries. Well, that's funny. Well, cool. Yeah, I'm kind of curious what your favorite Magic epoch is. Like, if you look back, like, what's your favorite time of the game? Uh,
My
as much
mind
as you're
doesn't
aware of it.
work that way, actually.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't really look back and say, "Oh, this was my favorite time." It's like, "Okay, I'm in thus and such a time. Whatever time I'm in, what's the best thing I can do with it?"
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Is there a product that you're especially proud of or the same framing?
I would say similar framing again.
Mhm. Yeah, sure. No, I mean, that's interesting and it's of itself. I think, yeah, I mean, everyone's different. Looking backwards versus always looking forwards, they both have value. But I certainly get like, hey, look forward. There's no real reason to dwell. Um, do you feel good about your time at Wizards?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything in particular you miss about it?
Well, the atmosphere, the sort of intellectual atmosphere of we're trying to figure this stuff out and we're going to spend a lot of time on it.
Hmm.
But I couldn't have been the kind of dad I am now while working there. So life moves on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, right on. Well, it's good to see you. I'm glad you're doing well and playing StarCraft, even if it's at a limited amount.
Uh huh. Okay.
Yeah. Um, I guess there was one last thing that you were talking about, which was how to fix gerrymandering.
Oh,
Gerrymandering.
yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. Americans can fix gerrymandering if we choose to. We can make it, we can set up. So the key to that is your rules for forming political districts have to be completely deterministic. As soon as you go to, oh, we're going to have an independent commission that decides these things, that's human agency. And at that point, it can be gamed
Hmm.
because your independent commission won't really be independent and there will be rules for who gets on it. And the two parties will fight about what those rules are. So, what you have to do is have the rules for forming political districts be such that a computer program could decide which the districts will be. And that is possible. So, one example is you, whoever is actually drawing the maps accepts proposals. And the rule is the proposal that wins is the one where the districts have equal population and the average diameter of the districts is as small as possible.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Where you define the diameter as the farthest distance between 2 points in a district, crowflies distance. Now, the districts, I'm sure they won't be perfect. I'm sure there will be problems, but what it would be is nobody could game the
Game
system
anything.
to get an advantage out of it. And if you want to have other deterministic rules, you can. Like right now, there are rules like you can't overly dilute minority voting groups as long as it's clearly defined what is too much dilution and how you define who belongs to which minority. As long as that is cut and dried, then it won't be gameable. And as long as at the end of the day, you have to be able to write a computer program that decides which proposal wins.
I like what you're saying quite a bit. It's interesting to me. I've had a curiosity or this feeling that humans will have computers helping them over the next 50 years make decisions to help govern more fairly, hopefully. And so this taps into indirectly into like how I intuitively think the world will graduate over time after we get through our like uncomfortable rough edge periods trying to figure out how to live with new technologies. There is something. Oh no, go ahead.
I don't know that it will.
Hmm.
I know that it can go in that direction and that Americans could choose to make those rules. Now, whether we will, so the problem you're going to have is that neither um, extreme Democratic states nor extreme Republican states are going to want to do it because both of them are going to want to be able to stack the rules in the favor of their party, and this would prevent that. So, for the gerrymandering thing, voters hate gerrymandering, but I think high level people in both parties in states where they're dominant love it. And so, how is that going to play out? I don't know that we will adopt such rules. I just do know that they exist and we could if we chose to.
Yeah, no, that's smart. Let's see. I'm very interested to see how humans develop. We're certainly not done.
That's for
um,
certain.
Yeah, there's something important that we haven't talked about, and, you reminded me of that with your commentary on gerrymandering. So, we had a clip where that we shared on Instagram, got 1.1 million views in its first, 5, 6 days, and it was
Wow.
about how to beat Monopoly, and
Oh, yes.
you saw the video about it, and you were like, "That's not mathematically correct."
It's close to it, but it's not
Yeah.
quite. So, in Monopoly, you can only ever have 32 houses in the
Okay.
official rules. So, what that means is if somebody has a 3-property monopoly and there aren't 12 houses available for them, then they can't go to hotels, because to go to hotels, you have to go to 4 houses. Even if you
Mhm,
never put them on the board, there have to be those 12 houses available for that monopoly to get up to hotels. So if other players can occupy 21 of the 32 houses, then this f hypothetical 3-property monopoly could not get to hotels. But the guy said 4 properties with 4 houses on each one, and that's just not true. That would occupy 16. So you have to occupy 21, or but in the case of Boardwalk and Park Place, it's a 2-property monopoly. They would have to they would only need 8 available. So to stop that, if you took up 24 of the houses, they could still get hotels on Boardwalk and Park Place.
mhm.
So to really stop people, what you would have to have is 3 monopolies where you use up all 32 houses, which is pretty hard to get.
That sounds like a really unfun game of Monopoly, like,
Yeah,
the odds that
so
people wouldn't quit
that's
before
the
that
thing.
point.
Like, I read that rule, and when I was a kid, I played Monopoly a lot. I read that rule, and I just thought, "That's stupid. I don't wanna do that." And I just never mentioned it to anybody, never tried to use it as a strategy, because it just seemed I don't know why they don't change that rule, actually. It
What
just seems
games
dumb.
what games did you play as a kid?
Monopoly, chess,
Mhm.
war games.
War game. Okay. That makes sense to me. This whole conversation, like, if you were to summarize it, is people are very complex, and that computer should help them solve how to make it less complex, or mathematical design. Um, but people in particular, like, if you're working on systems like making magic, like, the human element matters
Mhm.
inordinately, and sort of figuring out how to get the right mix of voices in the right tuned to the right level at the right time, right?
Yeah.
Same with Russia and Ukraine. Same with Monopoly. If you can figure out how to thwart the hostile takeover, I think that kind of runs through, and that speaks to your wargaming background, your brain.
Which reminds me, there is one other somewhat serious thing that I want to talk about a little bit,
Yeah, go
which
for it.
is drone warfare.
Okay, that's a
So
little serious. Yeah.
people don't get it, just how much drone drones should change the military. The US right now builds about 100,000 military drones a year,
Hmm.
which sounds impressive, but next year, Ukraine plans to build 7 million. So I'm not so sure how well the US military would do right now if it got into a conventional conflict with a power that uses a lot of drones and uses them effectively. Uh, People say the US has the best military in the world, and in certain ways that's true, but for drones, we need to get with the program. I think right now, if the US military and Russia's military were to get into a close quarters fight, the
Hmm.
US would have a really hard time because of drones. Now, that's not going to happen because we don't have a land border and Russia is bogged down in Ukraine anyway. But we really need to get with the program on building drones like the Ukrainians do, because that's the future. And if you look at that war, like tanks are almost, they're not quite useless, but they aren't very useful because drones will find them and blow them up.
Mhm.
Artillery is useful if it has a long enough range that so there are many different kinds of drones. FPV drones are these little drones. They're like maybe this big. They have
Mhm.
a range typically of only 50 kilometers or so. So if
Mhm.
artillery has a greater range than the FPV drones, then the artillery has value. And some of it does, like HIMARS does. That's like rocket artillery. But short range artillery has relatively little value because the drones outrange it and they can just destroy it. So a lot of weapons that the US has invested in heavily are kind of obsolete. And we need to get with the program about understanding that and changing the what we build and the way we think and the way we procure. So what's also obsolete is going obsolete is big, expensive weapons systems, because if you build some $1 billion airplane or whatever and it gets killed by
A
two
cheap drone.
$500
Yeah.
drones, then how
Mhm.
much good did it do you?
Yeah, I mean, war itself is the forcing function that forces you to get good at being, at war, and, it is,
Right.
yeah, yeah. It's, I wouldn't be surprised if you're right here in terms of, like, there will need to be numerous iterative, evolutions beyond where we're at today in terms of how we think about how battles are fought. Uh, Certainly hope we don't go to real war while, this current regime is in office. I think it would be pretty bizarre.
Well, you never want to be in a war. Uh, but then sometimes I mean, then there's this whole Iran situation. So you hope that if they do something about it, which they well may, that it just succeeds and it's over. But
Mhm.
will that happen? I don't know. And having better drone usage would probably help.
I agree. All right, man. Well, I
Okay.
enjoyed the chat. It's nice
Yeah,
to see
so did
you.
I. Yeah. Thank you for calling.
I am channeled back to shuffling with white cards with one word of ink on it and playing against you in in R&D. I am sure it would have been a hotly contested battle, and
I'm sure.
I'm sure one of us would win. So good luck to either of us in that theoretical battle. Nice to see you.
Okay. Good to see you. Bye bye.
Farewell, sir.